One British general, handing over his sword in a muddy field, changed the entire course of a war that Britain thought it had already won. In the autumn of 1777, that quiet moment in upstate New York would end up dragging France into a fight that turned a colonial rebellion into a global war. Just months earlier, nobody in London believed any of this was even possible. They thought the war was practically finished. The rebels were starving, freezing, and falling apart, and one more push would end it for good. What they never saw coming was how badly their perfect plan would collapse in the forests of New York, and how one arrogant general's confidence would hand America the turning point it desperately needed. By early 1777, the American cause looked almost hopeless. George Washington's army had been pushed out of New York and was barely surviving the freezing winter in New Jersey. Soldiers were deserting every week, enlistments were running out, and the government back home was printing worthless money just to stay afloat. Meanwhile, Britain had the strongest military on the planet, an empire's worth of money behind it, and a navy that controlled every major port on the coast. To the British, this wasn't a war anymore. It was just a matter of finishing the job before it got embarrassing. So British leaders came up with what they believed was a genius plan. 3 armies would move at once, one marching south from Canada, one pushing north from New York City, and a smaller force cutting through from the west. If all 3 met near Albany, they would cut off New England completely, choking the rebellion of supplies and support. On paper, it looked unstoppable. In reality, it depended on perfect coordination between commanders separated by hundreds of miles of wilderness. And that single flaw would end up destroying the entire plan. The man leading the northern invasion was General John Burgoyne, a confident, image-obsessed officer who traveled with fine wine, extra uniforms, and even his mistress. He was convinced this campaign would make him a legend, and he pushed hard to secure command of it. His army looked powerful on paper, too. Thousands of British soldiers, German mercenaries, and Native American allies, all marching south with heavy cannons and endless supply wagons. But this wasn't an army built for a brutal wilderness campaign. It was an army built for celebration, and that mismatch would soon become impossible to ignore. At first, everything seemed to go exactly as planned. Burgoyne's forces captured a major American fort almost without a fight, sending shockwaves of excitement all the way back to London. It looked like victory was already guaranteed. But instead of taking the fast, easy route south, Burgoyne chose to march his massive army straight through dense, untouched forest, dragging heavy cannons through terrain that swallowed wagon wheels whole. American forces responded by destroying bridges, blocking roads with fallen trees, and stripping the land of anything useful, turning what should have been a short march into a brutal 3-week nightmare. As Burgoyne's army crawled deeper into hostile territory, supplies ran dangerously low, and desperation started setting in. He sent hundreds of troops to raid a nearby town for horses and food, expecting an easy win. Instead, they walked straight into a furious militia force that crushed them in brutal, close combat. In a single afternoon, Burgoyne lost a huge chunk of his army and gained absolutely nothing in return. At the same time, another British force meant to support him was defeated and forced to retreat, leaving Burgoyne completely exposed and alone. Then came the moment that should have ended the campaign right there. The other major British army, the one supposed to march north and meet Burgoyne, changed plans entirely and sailed off to attack a different city instead. That decision cut Burgoyne off from any hope of reinforcement or rescue. Any smart commander would have turned back immediately. But Burgoyne refused to admit defeat and instead pushed his shrinking, starving army even deeper into enemy territory, cutting off his own escape route in the process. By the time Burgoyne reached the American army's fortified position, he was outnumbered more than 2-1, yet he still chose to attack. What followed was some of the most vicious, close-range fighting of the entire war. Hours of brutal combat that left hundreds of soldiers dead or wounded on both sides. Even though the British technically held the ground when it ended, they had lost too many experienced officers to recover. It was the kind of victory that quietly destroys an army from the inside, even while it still stands. For the next 18 days, Burgoyne's situation only got worse. His men waited for reinforcements that never came and supplies that never arrived. American militia kept pouring in from every direction, surrounding his camp and cutting off his options one by one. Horses started dying, food ran out, and desertions increased daily, while Burgoyne kept enjoying fine dinners as if none of it was happening. It was the kind of slow, painful collapse that makes you wonder how someone could watch disaster building right in front of them and still refuse to change course. When Burgoyne finally launched one last desperate attack to break through, the Americans hit back with everything they had. A previously sidelined officer named Benedict Arnold, furious and reckless, charged straight into the chaos without orders and became the unstoppable force that broke the British lines. His leadership turned the tide of the entire battle, even as he was severely wounded in the process. That single moment on the battlefield decided the fate of Burgoyne's entire campaign, and it's wild to think how differently history might have unfolded if that battle had gone just slightly differently. With his army broken, surrounded, and completely out of options, Burgoyne had no choice left but to surrender. Nearly 6,000 British soldiers laid down their weapons that day, making it one of the largest surrenders in British military history up to that point. It wasn't just a battlefield loss, it was proof that the seemingly unstoppable British army could actually be defeated. That single realization changed everything, because it convinced other powerful nations that supporting America wasn't just risky charity anymore. It was a smart and winnable bet. Word of the surrender reached Europe fast, and it completely transformed how the world viewed the American cause. France, which had been secretly helping from the shadows, finally agreed to openly support America with money, weapons, and warships. Other nations soon followed, turning what had been a struggling colonial rebellion into a full-blown global conflict against the British Empire. None of that would have happened without this one turning point, which shows just how much a single decisive moment can completely reshape the future. In the end, the very man who caused this disaster went home in disgrace, forever remembered for losing an entire army instead of winning the glory he expected. Meanwhile, the soldier whose bravery saved the battle went on to become one of history's most infamous traitors, proving that even heroes can end up on the wrong side of history. This story isn't just about a battle. It's a reminder that overconfidence can destroy even the strongest plans, and that a single turning point can completely rewrite the future.